Story 1. Was zipping my jacket up with a little gusto. The zipper caught on some fabric. My hand slipped off the zipper pull, and I punched myself in the face. Black eye. Story 2. I laid a 2x4 on a sawhorse to make a bike ramp. The 13th or 14th time I jumped, the board moved. The bike hit the sawhorse and stopped. I flew like Superman and landed on my face. My body carried over and I fractured 2 bones in my neck. Story 3. Broke my cheekbone doing dumbbell hammer curls on a preacher bench. Burnt my balls when the cat jumped on my lap where I was holding a mug of tea. A common occurrence in my house. Everyone be careful with the kitchen knives. I've just sharpened them. I say, bastard, where are the sterile strips and the plasters? I exclaim a couple of hours later. Story 4. I caught a funky whiff and lifted my foot to my face to smell, just in case. I heard and felt a tearing sound from my knee and was limping and in pain for a few weeks after. Story 5. I was just finishing up mounting a fan on a transmission cooler for a car I was building. For some reason, while the fan was on, I just tried to stop it with my finger. I have no idea why that made sense, and it nearly took my finger off. Story 6. I was at a park, and a monster goose chased me onto a tree that had fallen over a creek. While attempting to escape and running over the tree, I slipped and hit my ribs as I slowly slid off the side into the water, also landing on rocks. The goose still bit me. In my defense, the goose was 8 feet tall and had fangs. Story 7. I punched the floor while watching an Ohio State football game. I broke my knuckle but didn't do anything for weeks until I got a handshake from a supplier that almost knocked me down in pain. Story 8. Okay, I got a really good one for this. Let me first preface this with some information. First, I am transgender. Second, my family didn't know I am transgender, and them finding out would have been really bad at the time of this story. Third, I had just gotten a job at a grocery store, and because I was living with my family and the job I had was about $3 over minimum wage at the time, I had loads of disposable income that I was using on nice things I always wanted. New shoes, new clothes, cool knives, feminine clothes, first aid kits. After listing that, I'm sure you can tell where the dumb stuff is coming from. Also, how my family doesn't have their priorities straight because 3 of those things are necessities, and when presented to my family, they were treated as luxuries. But I digress. So picture me sitting in the basement that was converted into my room so I didn't wake people and it was better for sleeping. The job was night crew. Having a good night off, dressed femme because that was the only time I could be, being closeted. I decided I was bored and started playing with 2 really nice knives I had bought. One of them I thought wasn't super sharp, so I tried cutting index cards with it and couldn't, so I tried a chop. It worked so well, so I did another and another and another. I was chopping these index cards into small, less than an inch squares. It suddenly occurred to me that this was ridiculously dangerous and could easily chop right into my finger. I said out loud to myself, "One more couldn't hurt," and chopped right into my finger like a character on a sitcom. So now I'm bleeding in a basement thinking I just outed myself because I was going into shock since I was having a panic attack in pain and bleeding profusely. I thought they were going to find me in the basement in an Amazon basic skirt, stockings, super femme attire on the floor, covered in blood, passed out. I ended up sitting on the bathroom floor and squeezing my finger wrapped in a paper towel as much as I could until my panic attack passed and my eyes could see again. Then my brain remembered the smarter purchase I made, and I used my first aid kit to patch up my finger so I could change and get driven to the urgent care nearby. Too long. Didn't read. Don't let anyone ever tell you a first aid kit is a dumb purchase. Story 9. Walking across deck joists while building a deck. I had a 16-foot-long 2x6 on my shoulder and moronically stepped between a joist, forgetting that there's no deck built yet. Story 10. I got hold of a good safety razor, somehow managed to get the blades out of it, and tried cutting the main electricity line to my house with it. I got an electric shock and burned my fingers badly. I was 6 years old at that time. Story 11. Weight lifting in high school. Coaches pushing you past the point of total burnout and screaming at you to keep going. Any good form is gone at this point, and injuries happen often. Story 12. Pot of boiling water. Making pasta. The handle of the pot suddenly detached, and I quickly caught the falling pot with my other hand. I normally don't have such great reflexes. Burns on my hand, arm, and stomach. Story 13. I walk to the trash can outside every other morning. The ground is flat. I did not trip or step on anything. I simply took a completely ordinary step and suddenly felt pain in my knee. Turns out I sprained it walking completely normally. I have no idea how. I blame turning 41. Story 14. In 6th or 7th grade, I thrust our wooden flagpole into the front porch light cover and cut my chin as a result. The silver lining was that I had a ready-made Halloween costume, as this happened 2 to 3 days before. Story 15. Had my rolled-up sleeping bag on the floor in my room. I thought I could free fall backward and not get hurt because the sleeping bag would catch my fall. In theory, it worked, but I didn't check how much space I had in my room. While I didn't slam the floor with my body, my head did hit my wooden desk chair, and I split my head open. I had to get staples put in my head. Story 16. I once managed to sprain my ankle by stepping awkwardly off a curb while texting. It's crazy how a split-second distraction can lead to a pretty painful mishap. Story 17. During karaoke, a drunk coworker started swinging the microphone from the cord. It hit the fake part of my front tooth. A story for another day, and it fell out. So that was fun. Story 18. I melted a Ritz cracker wrapper with a lighter, and it dripped on my hand, giving me small third-degree burns. Unrelatedly, that was also the first time I got high. Story 19. Decided I couldn't wait any longer to take the trash out while the apartment stairs were iced over. Fell down about 5 to 6 steps and then slid down more on my tailbone. I'm pretty sure these back problems a couple of years later are due to it. Story 20. I intentionally touched my leg with a hot glue gun to see how hot it was. It was hot enough to make my skin bubble. But here's the best part. I did it while I was in gifted and talented education. Yup, I was considered gifted and talented. Story 21. I was holding a pair of cheap sunglasses and having an argument with my wife about something stupid. I allowed myself to get so angry I crushed them in my hand, cutting my thumb and needing stitches, to which she brought me because, well, she still loved me even though I was a fool with a temper. She still does. That was over 20 years ago before parenthood, and we're about to be empty nesters. Story 22. Was cutting a bagel, hand holding the bottom of it flat against the bagel, and cutting from top down. You can probably put 2 and 2 together. I have done that 2 or 3 times, and it's incredibly stupid. Story 23. So occasionally, my right arm gives out due to an injury in 7th grade, broken arm that pinched a nerve and didn't heal correctly. Well, in 11th grade, I decided it would be a great idea to put 2 desks close to each other. I then propped myself onto my hands, lifted myself off the ground, and began swinging between the 2 desks. Of course, my right arm gave out mid-swing, and I ended up jackhammering my jaw across the solid wooden and metal-enforced surface of the desk. After putting my jaw back in place, I had to leave school, and a parent took me to get an X-ray to make sure nothing was broken. I probably had a concussion. It wouldn't have been my first. So the day is kind of a blur even though I'm in my 30s now. Story 24. Camping in a state park when I was younger. I forget how young but think elementary school age. We went into a gift shop, and I wanted a pocket knife that had my name on it. It was one of those small pocket knives with a blade, file, and scissors. My dad talked my mom into letting me have it. We went back to the campsite, and my dad showed me how to whittle a stick. He told me to always whittle away from yourself and not towards yourself. Well, I was working on this one stick, and there was this little nub that I couldn't get off because of how it was angled. Everyone went into the trailer to work on dinner, and I stayed outside to whittle. When I saw my parents were out of sight, I decided to try and whittle that nub going towards myself, which is exactly what my dad said not to do. Well, based on this Reddit thread, I imagine everyone knows where this is going, and yes, you are correct. That brand new pocket knife blade went right into my thumb. Blood came pouring out, and I screamed. Parents came running out and saw what happened. My mom said if we were close to a hospital, she would have taken me for stitches. I'm 30 now, and the scar is still there. Story 25. Slipped on a wet floor in a commercial kitchen. stuck both hands out in front of me as I slid forward into the sink. My left hand was impaled by the cold water faucet handle, which happened to be pointed directly at me. It went all the way through. Lots of bruises, some stitches, no permanent damage. Story 26. I had a boiling cup of tea and was switching seating positions on the couch. I spilled the whole cup on my hip and gave myself second and third degree burns. I got a cool scar but a stupid story out of it. Story 27. Tripped over my own feet in front of the executive offices. Security had to come out and help me up. I scraped my palm breaking the fall, which means I had to get a tetanus shot and workers' compensation involved. Story 28. I was about 12 and I jumped off a people mover, that little shuttle train that goes around fairs and such. I swore I could do it. It was moving so slowly. I was wrong. I bounced. The friend I went with died laughing and I still have the scars on my knees 4 decades later. Story 29. Running to first base in a kickball game, I severely sprained my ankle on both sides simultaneously. The doctor said I would have been better off breaking it. It's been 5 years, and it is still painful and often swells. Yes, I did physical therapy and was out of work for 5 months. I followed all the steps. Subsequently, the most painful part was gaining weight from being immobile and depressed for months, not being able to exercise due to the pain and fear. Kidding, not kidding. Story 30. I had a spare room and just used it as storage for a couple of years, so the room was pretty crowded. I had a television I wasn't using anymore propped up against some other things, and while I was trying to get in the room to grab something, I scraped my leg on the corner of it. It wasn't even on a sharp part like the bracket to mount it, just the corner of the front, and it left a kind of deep cut about 3 inches long on my calf. Story 31. Hurricane Harvey came, and we were in a hotel for a month. Came back home after repairs were made, and I tried to do an overhead press with just the 35-pound bar after not working out for over a month, and I tore my labrum in my left shoulder with just the bar. It was so stupid, and my shoulder doesn't need surgery, but I can't work out 100% the way I want to. If I do chest on Monday, my shoulder probably won't be ready for another workout until Thursday or Friday. It sucks, but that's the situation. Story 32. I was sitting on the toilet waiting for a second pee. My feet fell asleep. When I stood up, I instantly fell over because I had no sensation at all in my feet, and I fell weirdly on my ankle and foot. I had to hobble or crawl to the bed and wait for sensation to come back while writhing in pain. I was pretty sure I had broken something in my foot based on the pain and immediate bruising. I went to urgent care a short while later for x-rays and had to awkwardly explain how I hurt myself. No breaks, luckily, just sprained my ankle and bruised my foot. Story 33. My friend's story. We were snowboarding a couple of years ago when we were 12. My friend was going about 15 miles per hour down the hill. When he reached the bottom, he totally wiped out. Unfortunately, he ended up with a testicular torsion, but he didn't realize how serious it was right away. For about 4 days, he kept going to school, constantly complaining about the pain. Eventually, he went to the emergency room. 1 emergency surgery later, and he was left with only 1 functioning testicle. My story. I have this drift tricycle that I outfitted with red and blue lights just for fun. It's one of those push drift trikes, and the road I live on has a really steep grade. Unfortunately, the trike has no brakes. One time, I tried to stop by dragging my foot on the ground, and my ankle twisted completely backward. I ended up with the worst sprain of my life. I had to get a splint and then wear a boot for a couple of months because I couldn't walk for long periods without it. Story 34. Playing high school baseball, I snapped my ankle and realized I wasn't really that good. So, this wasn't going to make me any money, and it wasn't worth it to play anymore and keep getting hurt. Story 35. I walked into my new house, moving boxes from the truck inside, and smashed my forehead on the glass chandelier in the empty kitchen, laying myself out flat. I had walked past that thing probably 20 times before I did that. Hell of a way to meet your new neighbors. I also jumped off the top of a half-pipe, and my shoelace got hooked on a nail. I landed headfirst on the grass. While skateboarding home, I hit a pebble. The board stopped, and I didn't, going face-first into the blacktop at speed. I was riding my bike with no hands, coasting down a hill, when the front tire hit a rock and turned sideways, flipping me over the handlebars and tumbling the rest of the way down the hill. While rollerblading down a different hill, I swerved to avoid a car. There was no sidewalk, just mud, and I tried to jump it but didn't quite make it. I dislocated my collarbone. Story 36. Sliced an inch long into my palm with a fish knife, trying to wash it with a sponge. The blade was facing the sponge. I forgot that these knives are professionally sharpened every week when I worked at a butcher shop. The knife cut clean through the sponge and my hand. Story 37. The viral vegetable chopper, but not while using it to chop anything. My brain just malfunctioned while I was cleaning the sharp grid piece. Goodbye to the tip of my finger. Story 38. Trying to cut a frozen bagel with a very sharp knife while holding the bagel vertically in my hand. I can now say that getting stitches on fingers hurt a lot. Dumbass I was, don't do that.